Michael and Scott here, and this is the follow-up episode to the intro to Battletech, and this is supposed to be on, I guess, how to pick mechs, how to write a list, whatever. Michael was complaining that we didn't help him at all. He said that we were losers and he already knew everything that we put out there, and we didn't really help him. So me and Scott are going to try to help him, I guess. I guess that's the point of this episode.
Yeah, I mean, it's always a good option to tell him to fuck his own face, but I guess we'll help him.
All right. So I guess we'll just start like how I start building a list. So we went over in the intro episode, we talked about the factions, how to find the fluff for the factions, the different eras, whatever. So the very first thing that you need before you can do any of this is to pick an era and a faction. Like, that's it. So, like, if me and Scott are playing classic Battletech, I'm not going to get into Alpha Strike because I don't.
Yeah, we're good.
I don't really know a lot about Alpha Strike, and also because Alpha Strike, it's almost so simplified. There's not really, like, you just kind of pick a mech and it is what it is. Like, there's not a lot of, like, I can't show you, like, this one is good because it's cheap, even though it's not. I don't know. We're going to basically get into how to select mechs and stuff, and I don't think it really applies to Alpha Strike. I'll just shorten it, put it that way. So we'll get into how to identify what I consider a good and bad mech, things to look for. Like if you assign a role to a mech, what you should look for in that mech. I'll go over some mechs that are just like rock solid and cheap. Like if you looked at them, you would be like, well, this mech's way better than that one. But then you're like, when you start looking at points cost, you can see what I'm talking about. So we'll show you some that are like really, really cheap points, but do good things. We'll show you some that like push extremes, like one that like, if you want something that's just pure speed or something that's like a pure firepower or whatever, we'll kind of like go over different mechs for different roles, what makes that mech good at that role, things to look for. So like why that's important is a lot of the mechs don't do everything. Like most mechs are specialized. So you kind of have to have a job for it to do and then go find the best mech for that job. And having like people will just say, well, this is like people all the time are like, well, what's the best medium mech? Well, there isn't really an answer to that. Like, what are you doing with it? Are you using it in a scout role or using it as a brawler role, as a support mech? Like, obviously, if you want something that's a scout mech, even though like a hunchback is a decent medium mech, running around at 4.6 speed isn't great for scouting. You know what I mean? So it just really depends on what kind of job you're trying to do there. So we'll get into all that. And then how to build a list and go from there and just kind of show you guys some things. Get into more the technical aspect, I guess. So, go ahead, Michael. What were you saying?
I didn't say anything.
Oh, okay. Somebody started to say something. So the two resources you really, really need, well, actually, there's three resources. So whenever I want to build a list, I always pull up this Battletech master unit list because this will tell you who has access to what mechs during what eras. And also, once you find a mech that you want to look at, it'll tell you the exact resource you need to find its rule or to get its rules. And then I also like having Sarna. You don't have to have Sarna up, but the nice thing about Sarna is like the cool thing about this, if you know you want to run a certain mech just based on looks or whatever, like if there's a certain chassis you like, because I build a lot of things just based on looks, you can punch in the name of the mech and then you can look through a brief overview of all the variants. It's not going to give you the exact rules, but you can basically narrow it down a lot faster than going through and looking at every specific one, if that makes any sense. So you'll need the master unit list, Sarna. I don't know if I'm sharing my screen. I probably should do that before I start doing that. What are we doing here? There you are, Google Hangouts. All right, I'm gonna share my screen here, Scott, so I won't be able to see you.
Okay. Alrighty.
Share screen. All right. And then, yep. So now you should see master unit list, correct?
Yep.
Okay, so you'll need this master unit list page. You'll need Sarna up, and then you'll need your. I need to hide this so I can see your record sheet. So these are all the record sheets I have. So all of that is pulled up and ready to go. So what do you want to build, Scott? Like what do you want to look at? Do you want to just go over like my mercs? Do you want to start with a new faction we haven't done? What do you want to do?
Let's just do your mercs, because you'll be able to explain the methods behind them and stuff.
Okay, that'll work. So if we know we want to do mercenaries, you go to the Battletech master unit list, you click factions, and then you go to this mercenary thing. And if you're playing Kellhounds, you'd pick Kellhounds. If you're playing Little Scroons, you'd pick those. We're just doing generic mercenary, so pick generic mercenary. What era do you want to do, Scott? Because there's what'd you say? Jihad era? Okay. Yeah. So we'll click this Jihad logo right here. Boom. So now you have battle mechs, combat vehicles, aerospace infantry, this. We'll just look at mechs for now, because that's obviously like the key to the game. That's why you're playing Battletech. So like we went over in the other episode, you have the name here, the tons that it weighs, its battle value. These are points values. If you're playing Alpha Strike, we're going to ignore this. This is where its fluff is at. That's the technical readout book. That's fluff. This is its rules. This is your record sheets. These advanced and standard, you can ignore that. This is what era the mech was introduced. We've picked Jihad, so this doesn't really matter because we already know what era we're playing in. And this is the exact specific year in which the mech was created. So if you wanted to get really detailed and still play Jihad, if you look up here, the Jihad was from 3068 to 3085. So if you wanted to only play 3068, like the very beginning, even though this mech here was available in the Jihad, you can see it wasn't made until 3076, so it wouldn't be available. We're just going to do the entirety of the Jihad, though, for purposes of this. Okay, so we're doing mercs. So we'll start. Let's see. We want to do a command lance. So, so a really like classic command mech, would be like a Cyclops.
Yes.
It's an assault mech. In the fluff, it's got a command console, whatever. I'm just going off the top of my head. Like everybody's not obviously going to know this. If you are totally starting from scratch, you know nothing about the game. I mean, you're basically just going to want to go off like model looks, I guess. Like you could just decide, hey, I like the look of this, and then find the model name, and then scroll through and see if it's available to your faction, and then what variants are available, and then just literally go through. Like, say you really like the look of the Phoenix Hawk. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different Phoenix Hawks available. So you would just go through and find like these are in 3039 record sheets. These are in 3085 record sheets. So the rest. So you would just have to pull up your 3085 record sheets and your 3039 and go through each one and find your favorite Phoenix Hawk. This one's my favorite right here. We'll get to why. But so let's say in the fluff, you've read a book and you know the Cyclops has this cool command console in it. I gotta scroll all the way down. Look how many mechs there's available to mercenaries. It's pretty crazy.
All of them.
Yeah. Okay. Where are you at, Cyclops? Right there. So again, if you look, the Cyclops, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 Cyclopses available. Most are so the thing is, if you look here once again, 2 are in 3039, 1 is in 3050, sorry, 2, 3. Some of them are in 3050, and then the last one is in this 3085. Old is the new. So, I guess we can, since like normally I wouldn't even really look at these just because they're so old. They're going to be so old school technology wise. These are they're not going to end up being what you're going to want to choose, but we can pull it up anyway just to show people. So 3039 unabridged. And the cool thing about these PDFs, when you download them, this is all clickable.
Yep.
So you can basically shortcut right to what you're wanting to look to. So I'm just going to click Cyclops, and it's going to take me right to the Cyclops. So this is the first variant, and then the next one will be right below it. So we got those in 3039. Then the other one was in 3050 upgrade unabridged inner sphere. That's what the I is. So 3050 upgrades. That's 3055 inner sphere. So we'll open this one. We're going to do the same thing. Scroll down to the index and find Cyclops, which is right here. Click that bad boy. That's going to take us to the Cyclops. And then the last one was in 3085. Old is the new. So we'll open that one. And this is just how I do it. This isn't necessarily like best way to do it, I guess. I don't know. This is just how I've decided I like doing it. So we'll click Cyclops. Boom. All right. So we'll start with the 3039 ones. So if you look here, it moves 4.6, which is fast for an assault mech. That's about the fastest. I don't know of any inner sphere assault mechs that move faster than 4.6. There may be one out there. It would be an oddball. Oh, I know. There's a Battle Master that Steiner has that moves 5.8. You're talking like, if there is any out there, there's probably 3 or less out of the entire range. So this is 3.5 is probably the most common assault speed for inner sphere. 4.6 is a little less common and obviously better because you're moving faster. And then 5.8 is ultra rare to find in an assault mech. Here's its armor. Over here, we went over what that is. And then here's its weapon systems. So the first thing I like to do, you can see this thing has 14 single heat sinks, so it's only going to cancel 14 heat a turn. So the first thing I like to do, you look at its weapons here, we'll just add up the heat and see what it can fire. Like if it has like whatever weapons, but it can only fire half of them, you're going to have to look and see like, can you like, or is it like, sometimes that's okay because you'll have like brackets. Like if you have LRMs, which have a minimum range of 6 inches, and then you have a bunch of medium lasers, it's fine because you're not really going to be firing those at the same time because you're going to use the medium lasers once somebody's already inside of your minimum range of your LRMs. So if you're not going to be shooting them at the same time, you don't have to have the heat to fire all of them. But this particular, so that's kind of the case here because you got this LRM 10. Its minimum range is 6, and if you look, the medium range for the SRM4 and the 2 medium lasers is 6, this is your sweet spot. This is really where you want to be doing most of your shooting is medium and in. It's so hard to hit things at long range. I mean, these things can shoot this far, but your odds of actually hitting something are pretty slim to none for usually. So if you look, it's got 2 medium lasers. So if you add the heat up, that's 6. The LRM 10 is 4, so that's 10 heat. And then the SRM 4 is 3 heat, so that's 13. And then if you walk, it makes 1, so that'd be 14. If you run, which is the most this thing can do because it can't jump, it would be 15 heat. So the most heat this thing can ever make is 15. That's if you run and alpha struck with everything. And if you look, that's only going to leave you with 1 extra heat, which is extremely good. Because if you look here, have to get up to 5 heat before you even start taking any of these penalties. So for the first 4 turns, you basically alpha for 4 turns in a row. And then on your 5th turn, if you didn't want to, oop, I went too far. I messed it up, Scott.
Well, you can just go back to the top and click on the link again. That's usually what I do.
Right here. I got it. This is the other one. Yep, right here. So if you wanted to avoid this, you would just take a turn off from firing one of these other weapons, and then you would go, obviously into the -2 and start cooling off. So this thing's very heat efficient, so you're fine on the weapon, so it can fire all of its weapons. It's decently fast for an assault mech. It doesn't have case protection for the ammo. That's kind of an advanced piece of equipment. It wasn't available in this timeline, but it will be in the future. We'll show you where that is located. So if this thing had case and it would either say it right here above where it says left torso, or it'd be down here in one of these roll agains, it would say case. What case does is if this ammo takes a critical hit, it basically just destroys this section, but it doesn't bleed over into the rest of the mech and basically destroy the whole mech. Because what happens here is if you took a critical hit to this ammo slot, you basically take the damage to this area for all the remaining ammo that's not been fired. So this LRM-10 does 10 damage per block, and there's 12 blocks of ammo here. So it would do 120 damage. So let's just look up here. If you took 120 damage to your left torso, you can see it only has 20 armor blocks when it's at full health. So this would all be gone, which would then cause this arm and then this has 19 here. So you can only take 39 damage before you lose this whole torso. So you would take 39 from your 120. This whole torso would be gone. This arm would fall off. And then the remaining damage would then move into the internals of the center torso, which you can see there's only 29 there. So it would just basically, this entire upper torso of this mech would basically just detonate, and your mech would be obviously destroyed. So in a one-off game, that's bad enough. In a campaign game, it's absolutely devastating because this mech would be so screwed up, it would be almost impossible to rebuild or repair to be used further on in the campaign. So not having case and having, ammo in your center torso and your torso here isn't great. Once again, this is because this is an older mech in the 30 to 39 timeline. Very cheap. This battle value right here is its points. It's pretty cheap. Overall, you're not gonna. I couldn't really show you. We'll compare this maybe later on to like a modern assault mech. This is a poor mech. The only thing it's really got going for it for being an assault is its speed and its points. Like, it is very cheap. This amount of weapons on a assault is pathetic. Like, this is like a lot of medium mechs have this much firepower, if not more. And it's got really shitty armor. Most mediums have the same amount of armor. Like a good medium will have this much armor or more. So the only thing it's got going for it is speed, points, and obviously it's pretty heat efficient, but you're talking it's mostly because its weapons are shit. So we'll just compare it to this next one that's here. If you look, this next one has the same weapons the other one had, plus another LRM-10, plus another medium laser. It still only has the same heat, though. So right off the bat, we know from looking at that other one, the other one already made, when it ran and fired everything, 15 heat. So this one's going to make another 4, so that's 19, and then another 3, so that's 22. So you're already, if you try to alpha everything, you're going to be already into the negative, so it's not as heat efficient. Once again, though, it's not going to really happen because if you look, the minimum range on these LRM-10s is 6. So pretty much you're going to be firing in 2 brackets. You're going to be firing your SRM-4 and your medium lasers and not firing the LRM-10s, or only firing the LRM-10s and not firing this other stuff, typically. So looking at it that way, the heat's not really going to be an issue because obviously your 2 LRM-10s making 8 heat, and then you run which will make you 10 heat. You're still going to be 4 in the hole, so you're going to be good. And then at close range, you'll be firing the medium lasers, which is 9 heat. The SRM4, which makes 12, and then running, which would be 14, which is you're going to break even. So if you just broke it into those two, like long range and short range brackets and bracket fired, you're going to be good on heat. Look how much more armor this has over that other variant. Like it's double or triple. So this thing is starting to get into like legit amounts of armor that you would see on an assault mech. Once again, it doesn't have case. This is just because it's an older design. The scary thing about this one, though, is you got ammo here and ammo here and ammo here. So there's lots of plot spots that ammo can be detonated, and this whole thing's just going to go up in flames. That's just because of the timeline that you're in. But of the two choices, I would think that this one's obviously the choice to make. How about you, Scott, so far?
Yeah, I would think so too, man. I mean, this typically, you know, the big major considerations are, you know, there's that old saying, it can be deadly, it can be fast, and it can be tough, and you're going to pick two of those, and that's usually what you're going to get. This one is very fucking sturdy. You know, it's got a lot of armor.
Yep.
It can be pretty.
Real quick, I do want to point out why we're talking about being sturdy. The other thing, so if you look here at this box, a mech can only sustain this amount of hits in any one section before you start having real problems. If you take 3 engine hits, the mech's just dead. If you take 2 gyro hits, the mech's just dead. It falls over, can't stand up. Sensors, you're not dead, but for every sensor hit, I think it's a -2 to hit. So if you take 2 sensor hits, you're at -4 all the time before you factor in anything else, which basically means you'll never hit anything. And then life support, if this gets hit, your pilot can start taking damage at a much faster rate if your heat climbs too high or if you're in certain environmental factors. The main thing, though, I want to point out was these engine and gyro, because these are instant kills if you take 2 of these. Because this is old technology, the gyro only is the full gyro only resides in the center torso, and the engine also fully resides in the center torso. If you notice, there's no engine out here and there's no engine out here. So it means they have to basically get all the way through the armor on the center torso to start dealing damage to these things and actually scoring crits to this, which makes this thing what people like to call a zombie mech, meaning you can't. There are mechs we'll show you later that have an XL engine. An XL engine weighs less, but it takes up more critical slots. It takes up so many, in fact, that it pushes 3 slots out here and 3 slots out here. So if you look, you can only take 3 engine hits before a mech's dead. What that means, if you have an XL engine, it's really great for weight, and it's going to allow you to put lots more a bigger rated engine, so the mech should be faster, and you're also going to save weight to put more weapons on, but it makes it less durable, because if you lose a torso, so say somebody just cores out this left torso, which obviously has less armor than the center torso and less internal structure, so it's easier to destroy. If this gets destroyed, your mech's dead. Like, basically, you can destroy a mech with an XL engine by killing the left, right, or center torso, where this particular mech, the only way to totally kill it is to get rid of the center torso or take the head out, obviously.
Yep. Here you go.
So that kind of explains how this layout here also adds into the durability of the mech. So anyway, go ahead, Scott, with what you were saying.
And this mech is kind of, you get a really good deal with this mech, because for 1,584 points, that's maybe a, you know, middle higher road points value for an inner sphere assault mech, but it's fast. Like, it's a 4.6 for a mech of that size. You know,
this is cheap for an assault. This is real cheap.
Yeah. So it's a good get for sure. And when he said command lance, so lance is 4 mechs. You know, if you're an inner sphere player, command lance, scout lance, whatever, those are just terms we use they don't have any real in-game function, but those are terms you're using to understand understand why you're putting the mechs in a spot that you're putting them. So if I'm playing a command lance, that's going to be, you know, a big ass mech with a command console. Makes sense. It would be in a command lance. If I'm picking 4 smaller mechs, that would obviously be my scout lance. You don't have to call them that, but it, you know, labeling them that thing kind of helps you justify in your head why I'm putting something with these other things.
And if you play campaigns, there's that campaign ops book. If you play in that, there's actually rules for if you put together a recon lance, it gives you special rules.
Yeah.
And it actually breaks that down. Like, so there's a section like it tells you exactly what you have to have a recon lance. And then if you build that recon lance within those specifications, it'll give you X special pilot rule or whatever. That's only if you decide to play with those campaign rules. You don't have to do it. It's optional.
There you go. Right on. Yep.
So these are the two.
Actually, one of the questions that, like, as soon as he said command lance, I was like, well, do I have to have a command lance? Or I'm glad you cleared that up, Scott.
No, you don't. You don't. Like if you're just playing like a casual game, you know, at your game club every Friday or something, you can just show up with 4 mechs. Hey, this is my lance. It doesn't even really have to be 4, but for like. The idea is you need to hold yourself to some kind of accountability with the way the story is written. For Intersphere, it's 4 mechs. For clans, it's 5. You know,
we actually probably should have let off with this, but let's just the real reason is classic Battletech is not at all a tournament or competitive system.
Right.
It's 100% story based. Like there's really no way you could really be a tryhard. I guess really be a big shoots and try to make this thing
it would be very easy to fuck up your opponent. Like it doesn't take a lot of fucking, you know, trickiness to do it. But the point of playing this specific game is not just to beat the other dude on the other side of the table, you know?
Yeah, when you play Classic, you're basically playing because you've picked the era, picked the timeline. You're trying to play as fluffy as possible. So it just makes sense. So almost like at least half of why you're taking a certain choice, in my opinion, should be story based, and then the other half should be performance based.
Yes. Yeah.
So that's the other reason. Like if you want to play more of the competitive, like sit down and like have a really equal on both sides game that's just like purely to determine who's better at playing the game, I guess that's why Alpha Strike was essentially created.
Right. It's much more checkers. There's not a lot of wiggle room. You can play that. But for this, just, you know, always think I'm trying to represent something, because the very conditions of how we've explained of how to play this game are all narratively driven. An era, you know, me only picking things I would have within a feasible window. So just think of it like this, you know, if I want to play just a random, I don't know what it's just not, you know, your considerations need to be, how best do I represent this unit that I picked on the tabletop to their story? And then I will play after that. It's almost like a shallow role-playing game, really. I mean, you can look at these record sheets. If you're playing a game with 4 mechs, you have 4, like, they almost look like player sheets for a D&D game or something. So think of it that way.
Yep. So we've looked at these two 3039 mechs, so we know what they look like. So now we'll go to some more advanced versions of the same mech, and you'll start to see things. You'll start to see more weapons. It'll deal more damage. It'll have the same or more armor, and you'll start seeing things like XL engines and double heat sinks and all that. So let's go here and see what we got. Okay, so right off the bat, it's still moving the same. This thing still has way less armor than that last one we looked at. This is more in line with the first one. That said, this thing's got a Gauss rifle, which immediately puts it leagues ahead of the other two.
Yep, that's good.
It does 15 damage. So like in these other ones, if you look, these SRM, it does 2 damage per missile. So this is a maximum of 8 damage.
Yep.
And when you hit with a missile launcher, you have to roll on a thing called a cluster. That's why it has this C right here. So not all these missiles are going to hit. Usually you hit with an average of half of what this value is. So just figure whatever this is. If you're trying to figure in like average damage, you're going to hit with half the missiles. So that would be 2. And they're doing 2 per missile. So this is going to do roughly 4 damage. This LRM 10, you're going to hit with roughly half the missiles if you hit, which is 5. And they do 1 per missile, which is 5 damage. So you can see if you look at averages, these lasers always do the full amount. So 5 damage, 5 damage, 5 damage, usually averaging 5 apiece. And this is usually going to average 4. This thing, right off the bat, this gun just does a straight 15 damage. And if you look, its medium range is 15 and its long range is 22. So it's got a longer range than any of those other guns. And if you look, its minimum range isn't bad. It only has a minimum range of 2, where LRMs are 6. So this is a much superior weapon system to what's available on the other ones. The drawback versus this one and the one we just looked at is the armor is pure shit on this one.
Yeah.
It also has 12 single heat sinks. Woohoo! That being said, a Gauss rifle only makes 1 heat because it's Gauss rifle is a railgun, so it's just magnets propelling a round down a tube. That's why it doesn't make very much heat. So once again, you can break this into long range. So its long range bracket would be the LRMs and Gauss rifle, which would be only 5 heat, and then it'd run for 7. And then it's short range. So it doesn't really have a heat problem, even though it only has 12 singles. And then if you look at the setup, there's still no case here. So, but it also doesn't have an XL gyro or engine, so it's not vulnerable to just being killed if you lose a torso. Of the 3 we've looked at so far, I still think I like this one overall. This Gauss rifle is appealing, but it just doesn't have enough armor. Yeah. So let's keep scrolling. Here's the next one. So looking like the same thing, pretty much. I don't know really
like
what's
a good thing for people to understand is you look over at this little diagram on the right-hand side of the screen, and you see how many armor boxes in parentheses you're going to have before you're in serious trouble, and it goes internal. Left arm says 10. So if we look at the damage on a Gauss rifle, it says 15. So not only are you going to strip all the armor off if you got hit by a weapon like that, but you're going to go 5 internal too, and someone's rolling for a crit. So
Yep.
Yep.
So let's see. This one has a command console in the head. Let's see what this one has. This one doesn't. So the only difference in this one and the one we just scrolled to is this one has the command console. So you guys can look the rules up for that. I'm not going to get into that. But this one has the actual command console. Yep. So between this one and the one above, you would probably go with this one. But I still like that last 3039 one. So here you go. This one I'm already liking better. So this one moves the same as all the other ones. It goes back up in armor. It doesn't have as much armor as this one, this 3039 one here, but it has decent armor. I mean, not decent for an assault mech. That's still pretty shit for an assault mech, but better than the other one. Its points are still low. It still has that Gauss rifle. It basically loses the LRM 10, but instead it gets a C3 master computer. So the C3 master, basically what it does, you need 1 master, and then you can have up to 3 slaves to go with the master. And the way that works on the tabletop is you pick any mech that is in that C3 network. You pick the mech that has the best range modifier, and then you use that range modifier for every mech in that. So what that means is this thing could sit back at so let's say you wanted to keep it at long range just to shoot the Gauss rifle at shit. You could keep this thing all the way back 22 inches away, and then say you had like a Jenner with a C3 slave that's fast and hard to hit. You could run that Jenner up and get like 2 hexes away, and then this thing would count as being 2 hexes away. So then you would, even though you're shooting at long range, you're going to count as if you're in short range.
Yep.
So
that's pretty good.
Yep. And you want to protect the mech with the master. If a mech with a slave dies, you still have the other 2 slaves in the master, and the network's unfazed, other than you're down a member. If this master goes, the slaves basically cease to function because the master computer is broken. So any mech with a master in it, you want to keep back. So this
Yes.
starts getting into like this is a true command mech where you can run a whole C3 lance on it, and it's got a decent long range weapon. It's got pretty shit armor for assault, but still better than the other one. And you got this master computer, like I said, to run the C3. So it's okay, but let's keep moving on.
Yep. I think it's a really cool choice because if you're trying to picture in your mind's eye what you would take as a command vehicle for your command lance, because everything's got to have a command element to it, that having that C3 master thing, that kind of fits that bill. So that would be a good choice.
Okay, so if you look at this one, this is the first one with a Gauss rifle in it that has tons of armor. Look at the armor on this one. This is actually has a legit amount of armor. It has all the same weapons as that very first Cyclops we looked at in 3050, but it just has tons of armor. Also, if you look down here, it has case. See where it says case right here?
Yep.
So that means any of this ammo that gets hit, it basically is still going to destroy this section, but it vents all the force out the back, so none of this damage that you would take here bleeds into the center. So basically, if you got hit in this SRM ammo, which you can see, it's an SRM 4, so each volley does 4 damage, and you got 25 volleys, so that's 100 damage. Normally, if you got hit without case, it's going to rip this torso off, and then all that's left will go in the center and destroy it as well, so your mech would basically be dead at that point. Here, you're still going to take the 100 damage, but it's all localized to this area, so you're basically just going to lose this torso. This arm will fall off, but your mech's not destroyed. So it's much safer. Where it says ferrofibers here, this has a special type of armor. So what ferrofibers armor does is you get... so armor, there's several different types. You got standard, you got ferrofibers, you got light ferrofibers, heavy ferrofibers, hardened, ballistic, reinforced, all this stuff. All that armor type, it will tell you in the rule book. Normally, if you're just playing sheets like this, it doesn't matter. If you're constructing your own mech or you just want to understand what's going on, ferrofibrous armor gives you more dots per ton. So like standard armor, I think gives you like 14 dots for 1 ton. Ferrofibrous will give you like 16 or 17 dots for 1 ton. So basically, you buy a ton of armor, but you get more armor for that ton that you spent. So you're taking up less of this 90-ton limit, but you're getting more armor. The drawback to it is it takes up internal slots. So what can happen is if you start putting all the goodies, like this thing has Indo Steel on it too, if you do like an Indo Steel internal structure, so you save weight, and ferrofibrous, so you save weight, the drawback to that is you're filling up all these slots. You can look here, this thing is, every slot on this thing is full. It's got Indo Steel, ferrofibers everywhere. So it basically doesn't have any more room for weapons. So if you can see this Gauss rifle that we talked about liking, look how many critical slots it took up. It takes up a whole side torso of 6 slots plus another 1. So this mech... Oh, sorry, go ahead, Scott.
That's bad. That's bad because, like Ryan explained with the Gauss rifle, it's a railgun essentially. So the ammunition is not explosive on a Gauss rifle. It's just like solid slugs, but the Gauss rifle itself is. So if you have that many slots taken up by the weapon and he hits even one of them, it's going to blow up and do damage to you.
It does 15 damage to your internals, which if you look here, this has 19. So it's pretty much going to almost take out this entire torso. The thing is, though, let's say even if this thing it doesn't, but let's say this blew up for 50, it doesn't really matter because you still have case, so it's not going to bleed over.
Right.
So it's nice that it has case, but Scott is right about that. But anyway, this thing is crit pack, so meaning you're not going to be able to fit a lot of weapons in it, not because of weight, but because of every weapon. Not only does it take up weight, but it takes up critical slots. So by this thing taking Indo Steel and ferrofibers, it saved a lot of weight, but it doesn't have a lot of room for weapons. It's also the first design here that has double heat sink, so it only has 11 heat sinks, but they each count as 2, so you cancel 22 heat. The only drawback to doubles is when you lose one. So say there's got to be a double in here somewhere because it has 11. Where are you at, double heat sink?
Up its butt. I don't know where they are, but
Gotta be here. Where am I missing it?
fuck, I don't know. Sometimes they're not always on there. Sometimes the double.
Well, the first 10 shouldn't be, but there should be one more on here somewhere. Anyway, if you take a critical hit to a heat sink, you would lose 2 instead of just 1 on a single. But double heat sinks are almost a must-have when you get to the later timelines.
Yep. Another thing about the ferrofibrous, could you go down to his arm, Ryan? Or where we were. Okay, so you see his left torso, right? And you might have said this, and maybe I just caught the second half of it. But anytime you land on ferrofibrous or endosteel, that's a reroll. So it doesn't do anything, but you're going to reroll it. Well, if your only other 2 possible results are your weapon, because you have that type of armor on there, it's going to take your weapon off. So,
well, even if you didn't have this armor, these would all just say roll again. So that's not really a drawback.
Okay. I didn't know.
It's going to be the same either way. The main thing is these actually take up a slot that you can't basically put weapons or ammo in.
Yep.
So then you got this version. So this version it's probably a periphery version. Yeah, H. This is the probably Marion hegemony. It's got an AC 20, which is okay. It's extremely short range, but it does a block of 20 damage, which is fucking ridiculous. You can like saw an entire light mech in half with that.
Boom.
It's got a moderate amount of armor. It's kind of in between. The main thing that this has got these 4 rocket launcher 20s. These are just one-shot weapons. They're fire and forget. So once this thing fires these, like it could do one big, gigantic, major alpha strike. You could shoot somebody with this AC 20 and all these rocket launcher 20s and just totally fuck someone's world up. But then once these are gone, you're just left with the AC 20 and the 2 medium lasers. So they're like one-shot weapons. It's also using ferrofibrous, you can see here. So it's okay. I don't really like it. I don't like the one-shots. It's got the double heat sinks. You got this one. It's got decent amount of armor. It's got an Ultra AC-10, Streak SRM-4, an MRM-20 with no Apollo. So it's going to take the -1 to hit just because of this weapon system. And 2 ER mediums. So this is starting to get a little bit more advanced tech weapon-wise. Let's look down here. It's got double heat sink, so it's not going to have a heat problem. It's got case. It still just has the standard fusion and standard gyro, so it's not pushing that out there. So there's no command console and there's no master. So this is just even though this would be your quote-unquote command mech, it would just be like fluff-based. It's not actually like rules-based.
Right.
This one's okay. This MRM-20, you're not really... It's minus... MRMs are -1 to hit because they're a dummy missile unless they have this guidance system called an Apollo, which would say Apollo fire control system underneath of it. MRMs without the Apollo aren't very good, so you can't really count on this. The Streak is good. Streak SRMs are good. The Ultra AC-10 is okay. It's a decent weapon. And then the medium lasers have been upgraded to ER version, so they make a little more heat. They make 5 heat instead of 3, but they shoot further.
Yeah,
once again,
not to like get into the crunch of it too much, but like the streak weapons, anytime a weapon's a streak, instead of having to roll on a cluster chart, which you'll become familiar with if you actually start playing, all your missiles are going to hit and it always fires. So if you miss with it, you don't actually expend any ammo or cause heat.
Yep. Basically, these are a streak is basically a heat seeking, or it basically has to lock on. So like Scott said, the reason these are better than the standard SRM-4, if you fire your normal SRM-4 and miss, you still make the heat because the weapon was fired and you still expend the ammo. This gets around that. If it misses, you don't actually fire, you don't make the heat. Also, when the other one hits, you roll on the cluster table. So like we said, SRM-4, your average is going to be 2, so you're doing 4 damage, where when this thing hits, it's doing its full 8 damage every time because all the missiles hit. It either misses or it hits. That's all the Cyclopses on here. So there's one last one here in 3085. So this one, look, immediately it's slower. So it's the only one that moves 3-5. It's got more armor than the rest of them, I believe, if you look at the armor here. And then you look over here, it's got 2 Gauss rifles instead of 1. It's got an LRM-10, 2 medium lasers, SRM-4. It's costs way more than the other ones. It's 600 points more than most of the other ones. It's got plenty of heat sinks. It's got 10 doubles. So it has 20. This is only 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 15, 16, 17. When you run, you're good. You can alpha everything every turn if you want. It has case to protect those explosions. Like I said, no gyro or engine pushed out into the torso, so it's a zombie mech. It doesn't have the command console or the master. So once again, this would just be a good for like fluff purposes. If you read about Cyclops, it's considered a command mech. So this one to me is clearly the best one if you're not too worried about the speed. If you wanted something faster, I think personally I would go with the one with the master computer and try to build a C3 Lance out of it. Once again, that's all just opinion based. But that just goes to show, like we went through, we looked at every variant of this particular mech. The Cyclops isn't up my alley. I personally just would never run a Cyclops. The only time I would run it is if I was wanting a mech with a C3 master and I was playing a certain timeline where it was the only one available. But at least you got to go through the process with us of what we look at when selecting a mech.
Yep.
So, let's look at a mech. Let's see. So we'll close these out. We don't need these anymore. So if we wanted to build a command mech, like that would be something like that. Where you want to go with this now, Scott? Like
Gladiator F. Hit him with the fucking old school beats.
What do you mean?
The fucking like let's look at modern tech. Like what's the worst case scenario? Something.
Let's see. Modern technology.
Punch your fucking nuts off. And I'm thinking the Gladiator F, that one with the mask and the fucking.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of something else that would be a good representation of something where we could, because we need something that's old, and then we could look at something that's new tech.
Something that's old as shit. So an Atlas is a heavy mech.
Yeah,
so.
Let's do. Hang on, let me look at my mechs here and pick one. Let's look at what's a good example? Marauder. Yeah, we can do that. We'll look at that. So we'll go. Oops. We'll look at a Marauder.
Yep. Well, you could even look at just another variant of a Marauder, like an earlier.
We'll look at this early on Marauder. It's in 3039 again.
And then look at the 7M. That's the Star League update one.
No, we're going to look at the 3145 Davion one. You said you wanted a good comparison.
There you go. That's fine.
Open. There it goes.
So while he's doing this, like I'll talk a little bit to the Force Org thing. So typically Intersphere, their militaries are based off a doctrine that organizes off groups of 4. So if you're going to have a lance of 4 scout mechs, a lance of 4 tanks, a lance of 4 vehicles, whatever, anything of, a company of 4 little infantry bases, whatever. Just think in groups of 4. With clans, if you're leaning more towards the clan player thing, that's going to be 5s. So you're going to have 5 mechs, 5 tanks, 5 infantry bases, whatever. There's some clans that do things a little bit differently doctrine wise, like maybe mixing in a tank inside those mech lances or something like that. But that's just like a general guideline when you're making this. Like, oh, I'm gonna play a 7.5K game. As an inner sphere player, I know I need to pick 4 mechs out of this point allotment I have.
New tech, new upgrades.
Does this one have it?
Yep, right here. Boom.
The fucking murder.
90. All right.
Oh yeah.
So we're gonna start here. So this is old tech. This is 3039. So if you look here, it's got 2 PPCs, one in the left arm, one in the right arm, and you can find them down here in the left arm and the right arm. It's got 2 medium lasers, one in the left arm, one in the right arm. Once again, you can find it on the crit chart. And then a large laser in the right torso. That's what this gun is in the outline. So you look in the right torso, there's your large laser. And that's it. So it's all energy based. You don't have to worry about ammo. It moves 4.6 for a heavy, which is average.
Yeah.
Got okay armor for a heavy. It's not like gonna super blow your skirt up, but it's not bad. In 3039, it was pretty solid. It's got 20 single heat sinks, which is actually a lot of heat. It's got 20 heat sinks. Unfortunately, they're only singles. If that was doubles, we'd be talking. But it can cancel 20 heat. So that's where the main problem is, because if you look, it's got 2 PPCs. You fire those 2 PPCs, you're already at your 20 heat. Then everything you do, you're going over. So if you fire any of these other weapons or walk or run, you're already going over heat. So you're going to definitely have to bracket these mediums, but the problem is this large laser shoots almost just as far as these PPCs. So normally you'd want to shoot it, but it makes 8 heat. So if you fire in your long range bracket of your 2 PPCs and your large laser, you're already and walk, you're already over 9 heat, which is going to be putting you way up the chart. So this thing's got a major heat problem in my opinion. It's also for 3039, this is fairly expensive for a heavy. So it is what it is. And like I said, you can look at these. Now it does have just a standard gyro and engine. So once again, it doesn't bleed over into the torsos, which is good. Now let's jump to this 3145 version, which in my opinion is the best Marauder. It's the same weight. It moves the same speed. Let's compare the armor real quick. So this is 24 on the arm, 30 in the leg. So you can look, this leg's only 18 and the arm's 22. So it's got way more armor in the legs. This thing's center torso's 35. And the left and rights are 17. This one, the center torso's 33. So actually it's 2 less than the old one, but this left and right. So this thing overall has way more armor. Like I said, it moves the same speed. It's not that many more points. If you look, it's 1967. This thing's 1470. So it's like, what, 500 more? Yeah, basically 500 more. Not terrible. That's basically the cost of a shitty vehicle.
Sorry.
This thing has 16 doubles, so it's canceling 32 heat instead of the 20. So you're already at a bonus there. The other big thing this thing has is a radical heat sink system. So what this does is it counts your heat sinks as an additional 1 more than they normally be. So this thing basically has triple heat sinks. So it's basically going to cancel 16 more than what it shows here. So it's going to cancel 48, or am I doing my math right? 6, 30, yeah, 48. So it's going to cancel 48 heat, not 32. So here's how the radical heat sink system works. You have to decide to use it. If you use it, all your heat sinks count as extra, so it'll cancel 48 heat. Then you roll 2d6. On a 3 or better, you're fine. If you roll snake eyes, the radical heat sink system blows up. You take some damage, and then you can't use it for the rest of the game. Every turn that you use it successively, so like if you used it in one turn and then use it again the very following turn, it goes from a 3+ to a 5+, and then the next turn it goes to a 7+, and it gets harder and harder. If you take a turn off, So if you were to use it and roll and not roll Snake Eyes, it's good. And then the next turn not use it, then it would reset back to always be 3. So you can basically choose to use it or not, and it resets every time you choose not to use it. So let's look at this thing's weapons. So it has a silver bullet Gauss rifle, 2 medium X pulse lasers instead of 2 medium lasers, and 2 ER large lasers that are clan as opposed to the standard ones. So if you look at the 2, instead of PPCs, this thing has clan ER larges. But if you look, a clan ER large does 10, the PPC does 10, so they do the same damage. The difference is the range. So this thing short range is 8, medium range is 15, long range is 25. If you look at the PPC, long range is only 18, medium range is only 12. So you're 3 less here and what, 7 less here? Or no, 7. And then short range is, I think, 3 again. No, 2. So big difference. These do make 2 more heat per gun, where the other PPCs only make 10. This has medium X pulse lasers and has 3 of them, where the other one only has 2 standard mediums. So these only make 3 heat, deal 5 damage, but they're 3, 6, 9. These things make 6 heat, so double the heat. They deal 1 more damage. They have the same range, but the difference is these are pulse, so it's 2 easier to hit with them. Everything with the pulse rule, you get a +2 to hit, so these are going to hit way more often, deal more damage at the expense of causing more heat. And then this thing, instead of having the large laser, which makes 8 heat, does 8 damage, and it's 5, 10, 15, this thing is 7, 15, 22 on ranges, only makes 1 heat, so 7 less heat, and does 15 damage instead of 8. So way more significant damage output. If you totaled this up, you got 24. This is another 12, so that's 36. 37 plus 6 is what, 43? And then 45, 46. If you ran, which we already said it cancels 48 heat if you factor in the radical heat sink system. So basically every other turn, you can just totally alpha with this thing and cancel all of its heat and use that radical heat sink system, have no problems. So you're putting out way more damage than the other one because of this, and having the extra laser. You're the same speed, you have more armor, your heat management's better, you're putting out more damage at a longer range. The only thing where this thing is worse, if you look, is... For one, no case on the Gauss rifle, so if you get hit here, you're going to take 15 damage. It also has an XL gyro, so it's got double the gyro slot, so you're twice as likely if you take center torso crits to get hit in the gyro, and you can only take 2 before your mech's destroyed. And it's got this XL engine, which pushed out critical slots into the left and right. So if you basically lose your left or right torso, the mech's destroyed. It's a real problem over here, because basically if you get hit almost anywhere in this side torso, it's going to hit this Gauss rifle. And then when this goes up, because it doesn't have case, you're taking 15 damage. It only has 16 slots. So if you've taken a hit here to actually roll for a critical, you've at least taken 1 point. So it's already down to 15. And then if that happens to hit this whole torso goes up and it's destroyed. Then because this torso's destroyed, you take 3 engine hits and the mech's dead. So it's technically much more fragile. Even though it has more armor, it's more fragile, because if you lose basically this torso over here, the whole mech's fucking destroyed. I still prefer this one over the old one, personally, just because I'll run the risk. It's risk reward. I would definitely take this one over the old one. What do you think, Scott?
Yeah, I do. Now, everything the way it's built is built. All mechs in the game are all built off the same equation. So the same factors are factored in every single mech for how you get this points cost. That's why you're able to build things if you want or whatnot. But look at it this way. You can, if you're of the mind that you're going to take the cheapest possible variants to get as many lances on the table as you want, or stars, whatever faction you're playing, it doesn't like it. You're still, if your opponent rolls up with 5 of the best tech with the best, best weapons and anything, you're still going to be kind of playing in an exercise of futility. Like, it's very important. I think what I'm trying to say is to construct your list with balance. Yeah, it's okay to cut some corners in some places, but you need to make up for it in others.
Yeah, and if you play battle value, this is like basically points. You're usually pretty good. Where people fuck up is they give you the simple way to play that when they recommend when you first start out to play is to play tonnage, meaning we would decide we would play 400 tons. So instead of using points, you would literally just add the tonnage of the mechs. Well, look, this thing's 75 tons. This thing's 75 tons. So if Scott were to take this and I were just to be like, oh, okay, well, I'll just take this. I mean, that's obviously not going to be fair.
Right.
I mean, this thing's going to just shit all over this thing.
Yep.
So I don't really like tonnage. I'm not a fan because it doesn't factor in, obviously, all the other shit. We could really get crazy. Like if you look at something like while we're in this, just to give somebody a very extreme example of that, it's actually in this same book. Trebuchet right here. Okay, it's a 50-ton mech, right? Before I scroll down and surprise everyone, it's 50 tons. It moves for 50 tons. Look how fast it is. It moves 7-11, and it's got mask. So if you kick in the mask, it can move up to 14. This is fast. This is really, really fast. This is like faster than Locust fast. Got decent armor for a medium. Pretty good armor. Moves incredibly fast. Now let's look at its weapons. It's got 3 Clan Tech LRM-15s. So remember the LRMs on the Colossus or the Cyclops we looked at that had a minimum? Well, look at Clan ones. No minimum range. You can literally stand 1 hex away and just unload on them with these fucking LRMs. It also has 2 medium X pulse lasers. So normally pulse lasers, an intersphere pulse laser has a range of 2, 4, 6. So 2 short, 4 medium, 6 long. When you have an X pulse laser, it functions exactly the same, but an X pulse has the range categories of a normal laser of the type, but still keeps the pulse rule. So it's basically a longer range pulse weapon, and it also does an extra damage. So this thing's got 3 Clantech LRM-15s, super fast, super good armor for a medium, only weighs 50 tons. So if we were playing tonnage, I could just be like, oh, let's take a fucking lance of these. Here's 4 of these fucking 50-ton trebuchets. Look at its battle value. 2165. So by comparison, like some of these 3039, like let's find a 50-tonner in 3039. Oh, we're almost there. Oh, these are Star League. Those are actually going to be halfway decent. Hovercraft. That's a spider. We need to go down. 40, we're almost there. Why can't I click on you? There we go. Here we go. This should be, oh, still 40s. Boom. Hunchback. Look here, 1,000 points. So you mean to tell me if Scott took this Hunchback and I took this fucking Trebuchet, this thing's double plus 165 points. It's more than double the points. Because this thing, look, it moves 7-11, 14 with mask, puts out, let's just average these as 8. So that's still 24 plus 12. So 38 damage at, decent range. It also, it doesn't make that much heat, and it should have, it's still heat efficient. It's still going to be good on heat. Versus this thing, it's got an AC 10 and some normal mediums. So for one, look at the range bracket on this thing, and it's slow. It's half the speed. It has the same or less armor. This thing's just going to get crapped on by this thing. So that's an example of why I personally wouldn't use tonnage.
Yep, use battle value. I mean, plain and simple. There you go.
So far we've looked at nothing but inner sphere stuff. Let's real quick look at clan stuff and show people kind of the difference. Well, like this is clan tech. People saw the difference in the clan LRMs and the inner sphere LRMs are these don't have minimum range. They also, you're not going to know this without a direct comparison. I don't have one pulled up. This LRM 15 only takes up 2 critical slots because it's clan. I believe an inner sphere one takes up 3 or 4. So you're going to have the inner sphere weapons take up more room in the critical. Also, inner sphere weapons weigh more. So when you, once again, if you're just playing where you're not constructing anything or you don't care about digging into the construction rules, inner sphere weapons basically take up more of this 50-ton limit in this mech, both in weight and critical slots. So some people, like, if you look at a clan autocannon 10 versus a inner sphere autocannon 10, the range is the same, the heat is the same, and the damage is the same. So people would say, well, this clan one's not any better. Well, they're wrong. It's better because the clan one takes up less critical slots and weighs about half as much. So because of that, you're able to pack more weapons in than the inner sphere guy will be able to. Well, it's better because it allows room for more weapons. Oops. Let's close these.
Do you care to talk about pilots? Like, I could just briefly mention it.
Yeah, you can do that while I pull up a plan.
So every pilot is, the battle value that's listed on the sheet. That's saying you have a base, pilot of 4 or 5. Every pilot starts at a 4 or 5, and that's included in the cost of whatever.
Explain what the 4 or 5 is.
So 4 is this is a 2d6 dice system. The 4 is the base number you're starting at, and what you have to do is you have to roll better than whatever your like to hit roll modifier is. If you're a 4 or 5 pilot, that means you're a 4 gunnery, a 5 pilot. So you're starting out with 4, and then you're going to add whatever other additional modifiers you have, be it range or your movement, the target's movement, all that stuff. All the stuff that's part of that Gator acronym that'll be listed on your reference sheet if you look at it or look in your rule book. So obviously the lower number you have, the better, because you're starting with less modifiers on that hit roll that you have to beat on 2d6. And the 5, the piloting skill thing, it's same thing in concept, a little different in practice, but you can look it up and see what modifies your piloting thing. You have to beat it in an instance where you have to take one. But everything starts at the included in the battle value of whatever you're buying is a 4 or 5. If you want better pilots, you can look in the TAC Ops manual. That's you can purchase it off the Drive-Thru RPG website, like we mentioned in the previous episode, and that's going to give you a multiplication chart for you to understand. Hey, I'm taking this mech and I want to put this pilot in it who has, let's say he's a 2-3, a 2 gunnery and a 3 pilot instead of being a 4 or 5. Okay, you're going to take this mech and you're going to multiply it by this multiplier, and that multiplier will be like 1.38 or 1.82. So you're essentially adding that, if you're wanting to take a pilot and from a 4 or 5 and make him a 2-3, that's a 1.82. So you're essentially adding an extra 82% in that mech to change that gunnery skill from a 4 or 5 to whatever else you're wanting it to be. So you can find that chart and look at it. Also on master unit list, at the bottom of each mech on the whole website, you can go down, or any unit really, and they have a little cross-reference chart where the axis, the vertical axis is gunnery, and the horizontal axis of this little chart is piloting. And you can say, okay, I want to be a 3 and a 4, and where do my fingers meet in the middle? And hey, this is how much that mech costs. They've already done the math for you. So that's up to you guys if you want to add in some more tactical, depth to your rules. But as a clan player, like, it's pretty common for clans to have better pilots, like almost universally. They're just, because they're raised in a caste system, they're, that's all they live for, is to pilot this mech for the rest of their lives. So the idea is I would have better pilots than the Inner Sphere guy, and I want to represent that somehow on the tabletop. I could use that. So
okay, so we're gonna look. So these are both 3050 mechs. This is the Inner Sphere Orion. It's a 75-ton mech. This is a 3050 Mad Cat. It's also 75 tons.
Yep.
So we'll look at the armor. So the Mad Cat's 24 arm, 32 leg, 25. So 32 here. So the Mad Cat already has more armor. Slightly more armor. It's got more armor in the arms and the torsos. The legs and the center torso are the same. The head's almost always 9. I don't even really look at it. So the Mad Cat has more armor, even though they're the same tons. This thing, the Mad Cat moves 5'8", where this thing only moves 4'6".
Yep.
And that may not sound like a huge deal, but the thing is, the faster you move, the harder you are to hit. And there's a cutoff. When you go above 6 and you move 7, if you get 7 movement out of something, you get a +3 to modifier instead of only a +2, which is huge. It's kind of like going from toughness 4 to toughness 5 in Warhammer. It's very, you know what I mean? It's very deceiving. You think, oh, well, that's not that much. It's way better. It's way better. This is a big deal. So it's already moving faster. It's got more armor. It's moving faster. Let's look down here. This thing is cased, surprisingly. So I know the Mad Cat's cased, so that's the same. So this Mad Cat has 2 ER large lasers, 2 ER medium lasers, a medium pulse laser, 2 LRM-20s, and 2 machine guns. So look at all those weapons.
It's a whole lot of sad times if you're piloting that Orion.
This thing's got 2 medium lasers, LRM-20, LBX, SRM-4.
Is a bitch. Like, yeah, we'll die to that Mad Cat.
So this thing has 2 medium lasers, where the other thing had 2 ER mediums and a medium pulse. So this has 3 to 1, or sorry, 3 to 2, but these are better versions. They're ER. So, and it's clan ER. So remember those Inner Sphere ER mediums that were, I think 6, 9, 12? Look at the clan ones. The clan ones are 5, 10, 15. So just because they're clan with clan magic, they shoot further. Also, if you remember, the Inner Sphere ER mediums
that clan magic.
They did 5 damage. The Inner Sphere ones do 5. The clan ones do 7 because clan magic, because clan. So see, same thing here. Only does 5 damage. Clan ones do 7. Medium pulse laser, same thing. It's got the pulse rule. Remember that I told you that a Inner Sphere pulse weapon is 269? Yeah, look at the clan one. Double the range. Literally double.
Yep.
Or sorry, it's 246 on an Inner Sphere pulse laser medium. This one is 4, 8, 12. So yeah, and it does 7 damage instead of 6. So it does more damage, shoots twice as far.
Something important to note, though, is the battle value difference.
Right, we're going to get there. This thing has 2 LRM-20s versus this thing's 1 LRM-20. This thing has a minimum range on its at 6. This one has no minimum range, and also 2 of them.
Yes.
So, like Scott said, though, look, this thing's 2,737 points. This thing's only 1,400 points.
Almost,
Now, once again, look, if we were playing tonnage and we were just doing Innisphere versus, I mean,
So
come the
bad.
fuck on. I mean, really? Like, it's not fair at all.
You're gonna fucking French fry when you should pizza and have a real bad time, man.
Yeah. So, just this is a good comparison of clan and Innisphere shit as we've looked at things. Clan LRMs have no minimum. They also, let's see, this LRM 20 takes up 4 critical slots, where this LRM 20 takes up 5 critical slots, so it takes up more, like I said. This also weighs more. We don't have the weight out here, but if we did, if we went and looked in the tech manual, this one weighs more, so it's taking up more weight. That's why this thing has far less guns. This Innisphere one has XL engine. This clan one has an XL engine, but here, remember when we talked about Innisphere XL engines and how they put 3 out here in the side? Because of clan magic, they only take up 2 out here in clan. So clan max.
You're saying clan a lot. It's because you're getting upset, but
yeah. So clan mechs, if they lose a side torso, they do take 2 engine hits, and they do make 10. Each engine hit you take, you create 5 additional heat just for reasons. So you're gonna always be taking, like, if you lost this torso, you're just basically always going to be like spiked at 10 heat as a baseline instead of 0, which sucks, but at least you're not dead. Where this Innisphere one, if you took out this thing's side torso, it's dead. So the clan one, you can see it says case right here, where it says right torso, so that's cased. So you don't have to worry about all these this ammo shit. So yeah, this thing is just, it's far, far superior. Look at the heat sinks. It's got 17 doubles as opposed to 11 doubles. So it's got better heat management, more armor, moves faster, and throws out 2 to 3 times as much damage.
Yep.
And it's from the same year. They're both available. These are both out of the 3050 books. You can see 3050, 3050, and they're both the same weight. So this is why the Innisphere was totally like rolled over during the initial stages, is the clan invasion. So the struggle is real for an Innisphere player. The only thing you have going for you is you could basically take 2 of these shit boxes for the price of this, and then just try to double team him. Just be like, you know what I mean? Just kind of try to grind this thing down with your 2 shitty Orions. So that's kind of the playstyle difference between clan and Innisphere. And then later on, to give you an example, well, for one, later on, the Innisphere salvage a bunch of clan tech, so a lot of the Innisphere stuff has clan weapons in it, like you saw that Marauder we had earlier with the
Trebuchet.
Well, the Trebuchet had the clan LRMs in it, and that Marauder had the clan lasers in it. So you have that, and then you also have, like, what is something? I'm sure. So the other thing is, this is a it should say Omnimech, but it doesn't. So see where it says Prime right here, Mad Cat Prime? This thing's an Omnimech. Well, Omnimechs, all these weapons in the fluff are built into pods, and it's easily swappable. So, like, say we were playing so in the fluff, the way it works is, if this thing goes back to its base or its hangar or a repair depot in the field, you can pull these weapons off really, really fast, and then they have other weapons, other loadouts that they can quickly socket in. It's like plug and play. So this Orion, all of this stuff is essentially hardwired in. Like, it's there. In order to take this LRM off and make it something different, you're basically looking at an entire new mech design. It takes forever. It's not something you can do in a field. You have to actually, like, set up a fucking mech hangar and do a full repair on it. You can't. So the difference is, if me and Scott played a campaign from a rule standpoint, and I took this Orion in our campaign, this is what I'm getting. It's not changing. This is it. Where Scott, if we were playing a campaign and he took this Mad Cat, if we scroll down, instead of having a whole new mech, this Mad Cat A is actually the exact same mech, just with different weapons slotted in.
Yep.
And there's actually a time that give you in the campaign, like certain Omnimechs have a different time frame to slot these weapons in. So this thing could be changed from that other variant to this variant in a couple hours. So this thing could go back to its home lines. They set up a depot in the field and you could swap it out to this variant. So this is why it's called the Mad Cat A. So the prime configuration is this the standard, and then if you look, clan mechs will have an A, B, C, D. I don't know where this Mad Cat is. It's one of the classic designs. So it's got a lot of different variants. But here, let's remember those inner sphere PPCs we showed earlier that made 10 heat and did 10 damage and were like 6, 12, 18. Look at these clan ones. They're ER PPCs. They make 15 heat instead of 10, so they do make 5 more heat, but they do 15 damage instead of 10, and they're 7, 14, 23. And they only take up 2 critical slots because clan magic. So yeah, that's kind of the difference. So basically clan shit's just better in every way. It takes up less critical slots, it weighs less from a construction standpoint, and then it almost always does more damage, and it almost always shoots further.
Yep. So the play style is, this is clan players, your shit is better, but it's going to cost more. So you're going to have less. Generally speaking, inner sphere players, your shit doesn't do as much, is bad, but you're going to have more of it. So you have to play with those two considerations in mind. Like, as a clan player, my play style, I know my shit hits harder at range. I'm generally more accurate. I can take more of a beating. I have to use all of that, because if I only have 5 mechs to his 8 or 12 mechs, my margin for error is a little bit lower. I can't be as dumb with my shit and run up and like get smoked, because then I'm down, 1/5 of my whole army. So use all those advantages to your, if you're a clan player, you want to start engaging them at range and falling back and maneuvering. And it vice versa. If you're an inner sphere guy and man, I really fucking suck at range and I'm not going to win this, shootout contest at range, you have to play aggressive and get in their face and take away, as many advantages as they have. And that margin of difference closes a lot the closer you get, ideally.
And it's not all bad inner sphere players. Later on, if you start getting into Dark Age shit, like this is a 3145 Draconis Combine mech. Now, this is a 95-ton assault mech called a Tenshi for the Curetans. But look at this thing. It's got a targeting computer. So what a targeting computer does, remember when Scott was talking about your pilot being a 4-5 or a 3-4 or whatever? A targeting computer makes your gunnery 1 better for anything that's not a missile or cluster weapon. So when you look out here in these abbreviations, it'll tell you in the rulebook. So these rocket launchers, this M stands for missile and the C stands for cluster. So you can't, this is a double no-no. So neither one of these will use this targeting computer. That being said, they're rocket launchers, so they're one-shots only anyway. But this Gauss rifle and these 5 light PPCs can all use this targeting computer. So they're all going to hit at 1 better at every range just based on that computer.
Yep.
So this thing only moves 3.5, but it's got a supercharger. Remember that radical heat sink system where we talked about if you use it, you roll 2 dice and on a snake eyes it blows up and does damage. This supercharger or mask, I think it's a mask actually.
Yeah.
They both kind of function the same thing. It'll tell down here. Supercharger. It works the exact same way as that radical heat sink system. So the first time you use it, it only breaks on a snake eyes. If you decide to use it in 2 turns right in a row, it'll break on a 5. 3 turns right in a row, it breaks on a 7 or less, and so on and so forth. But if you just choose to not use it for a turn and go back to your normal movement, it resets back to only. So basically, just use it every other turn. So the inner sphere invents shit like this compact gyro. So remember, a normal gyro took up 3 slots, and then that XL gyro took up extra slots, like 6 or whatever. This goes in reverse. So this compact gyro weighs more, so it takes up more of the weight of the mech, but it takes up less space, so it's harder to hit and also gives you more room for weapons. Then they invented this thing called a light fusion engine. So you have the standard fusion, which is only in here. And then you had the XL engine, which weighed a lot less, but pushed out into here, where if you lost a torso, you lose the whole torso. This light fusion engine is a compromise. It weighs less than a standard, but more than an XL, but it only pushes 2 out here. So it basically is like a bootleg version of a clan version that only pushes 2 out. So it's like, it's sort of approaching as good as the clans have. It's not quite as good, but it's still something. So the way this, basically what I'm saying is the Inner Sphere starts pretending at clan tech. They can't get an assault mech to move 4-6 normally, so they just throw a supercharger on it. And they can't get the XL engine, so they just make this light fusion engine. When you combine the two, you start looking like a clan assault mech, even though you're not. That makes sense. So once you get into the later timeline, the Inner Sphere starts closing the gap technology. It's not fully closed, but it does get a little closer. You can see this thing still pretty expensive.
Yeah.
So, Michael, did we kind of show you some stuff? Like, does this help you at all? I mean, do you have any more questions on?
So, all in all, there were things that I had already understood, like the difference between mechs and all that. But all in all, I think you really went a lot deeper into how you pick your mech, and I think that, especially going into the heat sink, things like that, we had talked about it before, but just touching even base with that this time, you went deeper. And how damage output is put in there. I really didn't have too much understanding on what the filament was, or so that starts making a lot more sense.
Okay, so let me go over how damage is applied, because if you like, this is in the basic rules, but so say you took damage to this left arm, say, because this Gauss rifle here, right here, you see it does 15 damage. So this thing has a fuck ton of armor. Look at these dots. Shitloads of armor.
Yeah, it's fucking...
The first Gauss rifle hit, you're just going to mark off 15 dots. Second Gauss rifle hit, you're going to mark off 15 dots, and you're still going to have 2 left. So let's say you then took one of these light PPCs to the same arm. It does 5 damage. So you're going to mark off the last 2 dots, and then the next 3... go internal on this arm. So you're going to go 1, 2, 3, which is going to leave you with 13 left. Then you're going to roll for a critical hit. So you roll 2 dice. On a 7 or less, nothing happens. On an 8 or a 9, you do a single critical hit. On a 10 or 11, you do 2 critical hits. On a 12, you do 3 critical hits. So if you did a critical hit to this arm, if we rolled the 2 dice and say we roll a 9, that's a single crit, we would roll 1d6. So if we got somebody spraying something, they need to quit doing that.
Oh, shut up. Sorry.
So you roll a single d6. If you get scored a 1 through 3, you're going to hit the upper part of the arm here, this upper bracket. If you score a 4 through 6, you're going to hit this lower bracket. So let's say you roll a 4 and you hit this lower bracket. Then you roll another d6 to correspond here, and this is the actual slot that you hit. So let's say you got unlucky and rolled a 5, you would hit this Gauss rifle ammo. So it destroys this ammo. So this ammo is no longer useful. So it's going to go from 24 shots in that weapon down to only 16 shots. But that's it. Then your critical's done. If you hit this Gauss rifle, it does 15 damage. This Gauss rifle's destroyed. If anytime you hit a weapon, even if you only kill 1 slot of the weapon, like these light PPCs, each take up 2. If I were to hit this slot, this whole PPC is useless. I would mark it off, and then up here on my weapon sheet, I would, where it says 5, I'd scribble that out and write 4, just as a reminder. And once again, I have this sheet in a plastic sleeve where it's dry erase. It makes it a lot easier. This Gauss rifle got hit, it deals 15 damage to the internals. So let's say we'd had that scenario where we got hit twice with the Gauss rifle in the arm, and then got hit with the medium laser, and then it did 3 damage here. So I'm down to 13 in the left arm. Then I roll my crit and I hit this Gauss rifle and it blows up. So the Gauss rifle's destroyed, and then this arm takes 15 more damage. So it only can take 13 more. So it's going to rip the arm off. The arm's going to fall off, be destroyed. And then you got 2 damage left over. Normally, if you take damage, so say this arm, well, here, let's slow down here. So when you take damage from criticals, like exploding ammo or exploding weapons, the damage transfers in like normal, but it doesn't hit the armor. It goes straight into the internals. So this thing blowing up and doing 2 damage to the internal, it would do 2 damage. I wouldn't mark it here. I'd mark it here. So I'd take 2 damage. Tick, tick. And then because this internal area took damage, I have to roll for a critical again. So then I would roll my 2 dice, and if I scored criticals, I would start rolling in this left torso area just like before. Now, going back, let's say this thing, it took the 2 Gauss rifle hits and the medium hit, so it's all the armor's gone, and 3 of this is gone, so it's got 13 left. And I've rolled for my critical, and I got that ammo where it didn't do shit. Well, then the next turn, it gets hit in the same arm again with a Gauss rifle. Well, it only has 13 left, so it's immediately just going to rip this arm off. So it's going to be gone because it's only going to have 13 left, and then you're going to have 2 left over. But because it was applied not as a critical from an ammo explosion or a weapon explosion, it was applied from actually being shot directly. The extra 2 damage doesn't go straight internal. It goes to this exterior of the armor. But because this took damage, you would still roll for a critical, so you could take extra. But does that make sense, Michael, on the damage, how damage applies?
Oh yeah, for sure. That
Okay.
The whole explaining that, say like that left arm right there. So
Yeah.
so if you took a critical on that and they roll 3, that killing the entire Gauss rifle, that was something that I didn't understand.
Yeah. So that's another advantage
all
from
of those to like.
Yeah. So that going back to the clan versus inner sphere, once again, that's
Because
another advantage that the clan has. Because
yeah,
it takes up less slots, so you're less likely to hit it. It takes up smaller. Now, even if let's say you hit this ammo and this particular ammo was destroyed, and then later on you took a critical hit and you rolled and you got the exact same result, and you would hit this ammo again. Instead of hitting this ammo, you just roll again. So you're always basically when you score a critical, you always score a critical. You basically keep rolling until you hit something. So let's say, do we have a mech pulled up? This is a perfect example. So if you look
say
at this,
that you keep rolling, so like in the case I just had where the Gauss rifle's destroyed on a 3, if you had another critical that came in, would you like 4 through 6 for Gauss rifle? Like if you were 4, 5, or 6, would you keep rolling because that rifle's already destroyed, or you just destroy dead Gauss rifle even further?
on an instance like that, you destroy the dead Gauss rifle even further. But
Okay.
if you roll the exact one on a slot that's already been destroyed, it becomes roll again. And I'll explain why that is here in a second. But this is a perfect example here. If you scored a critical hit on this Mad Cat's left arm, you don't even really have to roll that first die, because if you roll a 4 through 6, you get this bottom one, which is roll again, roll again. So basically, when you end up with a scenario like this, you just go straight from, instead of rolling one die and then rolling another, you just go straight just to say, well, it can only be the upper arm, and then you just roll a single d6. And then if you roll a 6 or a 5, because the 5 is ferrofibrous, anything that's like this non-bold, anything that's not in bold or already been destroyed basically becomes roll again. So if you rolled so basically this, you can't hit the bottom, so you only just roll one die, and you just keep rolling until you get a result of a 1 through 4. So getting back to Michael's point, so let's say that Gauss rifle that you hit, where's that at? Right here. So let's say you hit this number 5 Gauss rifle slot and it was destroyed, and then later on you came back and you rolled this one. You keep further destroying the Gauss rifle because in a campaign setting, if this weapon gets destroyed and I go back, I can repair this weapon. And there's a repair cost associated with it. But the more fucked up it gets, the more it costs to repair. If you play campaign. In a one-off game, it doesn't really matter, but campaign games, it matters.
Gotcha. Okay.
Trying to think what else we could do for. I mean, that's pretty much it, man. I mean, I think we pretty well covered like how you read these sheets and I mean how you would build a list. I mean, the main thing is like you got to figure out what you want out of a mech. Like this Mad Cat's awesome. It's funny because Scott, like, I'm not saying like I'm sure Scott loves the Mad Cat. Everybody loves the Mad Cat, but it's like you get spoiled when you play clans because most of these heavy mechs, like this is a heavy mech, the average speed for a clan heavy is 5.8. It's rare to get a heavy mech that's 5.8 in Inner Sphere. So like, I literally want to like go find a room by myself and beat off when I find an Inner Sphere mech that moves 5.8 that has decent firepower, like an Argus or something. So it's kind of funny the difference between, but I like playing Inner Sphere. I kind of like that play style. Where you get more mechs, you kind of get shittier stuff, lower battle value or whatever. But I like my personal thing when I look at a mech, I like finding mechs that move faster than they should for their weight. So like if I played clans, which I'm building a clan wolf army, all my heavies, which heavy mechs are 60 tons, 60 to 75 tons are heavy mechs. I tried to find all mechs that moved at least 6 walking. So one faster than this to build my clan army. So all my clan heavies, because this is the average speed, I'm trying to go faster than average. And I've tried to do the same thing with my Inner Sphere. So like Inner Sphere, your Inner Sphere medium mechs, the average for an Inner Sphere medium is 5.8. So when I built my mercs, I tried to find mechs that move 6.9 or faster for mediums. And then the same thing for heavies. Inner Sphere heavies usually move 4.6. So I tried to pick all heavies that move 5.8. And then Inner Sphere assaults mostly move 3.5. So I tried to find all assaults that moved 4.6. And then when I played clans, it's basically the same thing, only one bracket higher. That's me. That's what I'm trying to look for. I found that I prefer the maneuverability and try like where I can use cover better, close the gap faster between my mech and the enemy mechs, or keep the gap open longer if I'm like have a long range mech. Like if you look, this mech has a bunch of SRMs, so this wants to be close. So it's good that it's fast because it can close the distance. There was a version up here that was basically let me see if I can find it. This is a good version. We'll just look at this one. So if you look at this, this has 25, 21, 21, 21. This is the only thing with 15-inch range. This thing wants to stay at this 14 range thing because this is where you're going to hit easiest with medium while also staying far enough. Like these medium ranges are 14. Most Inner Sphere shit, this is going to be in long range for it. So you're going to be in medium range hitting 2 better, and they're going to be in long range hitting 2 worse. And then if you're faster than them, you're going to always be able to stay. Like even if they advance at you at full speed, you're just going to be able to back up and stay at that range the whole game, and they're going to be fucked. So that's why I would prefer whenever I select my army to have this better movement where I can dictate the range that the fight happens at, or I'm better able to dictate that range. So if I have a standoff mech like this, I can use this movement to stay further away. If I have a close-in mech like the other one we looked at, I'm going to be able to close the distance while you're trying to back up. It's not going to matter. I'm still going to be able to run you down. The drawback to that, it's not a drawback here because this is the average speed for a clan heavy. If you look at a linebacker, which a linebacker is a clan mech that moves, it's the same weight. It's still 75 tons. It moves 6.9. It's basically supposed to be the replacement for the Mad Cat that Clan Wolf designed. It typically has less firepower, but it's because it's went more. It like this firepower that's missing went into making it move faster. And I'm okay with that. I'm willing to sacrifice a little bit of firepower if I can dictate the range. There are some people that are the opposite. Like if you want to build like a classic Steiner army, like Steiner is legendary for just taking like giant fucking just stompy robots that have slow speed, but they're like maxed out on armor and have a bunch of fuck off guns, like just big giant fuck off guns. So it's kind of the opposite of this playstyle that I like, would be that classic Steiner. Now you don't have to play Steiner that way. They do have elements where they can play other ways, but the joke, like if you hear people joke about a Steiner Scout Lance, the joking Steiner Scout Lance is 4 Atlases, which are 100-ton slow as fuck intersphere mechs with tons of guns and max armor. So that's like the joke about them. The other way you can go is, it's almost like when we talked about in Warhammer, like you have that triangle, you have, movement. Well, in Warhammer, you have the defense aspect, and then you have the offensive aspect, and then you have the maneuverability aspect. It's kind of the same thing here with Battletech. So you can usually get a mech that has like a lot, like just totally maxed out firepower, but it's usually gonna, like a Loki. A Loki is a good example of that. Shitloads of firepower, average speed, shitty armor. That's what a Loki's like. This Mad Cat is very balanced. It has balanced armor, balanced weapons, balanced movement. This is like the real well-rounded mech. You have something like an Inner Sphere Malice. Let me see if I can find it right here real quick. The Malice is just a brick. It's not super fast. It's fairly fast for an assault mech. But it has absolutely maxed out armor, but it doesn't put out very much damage. So this is a good example of just like a brick. This is basically all defense, and it sacrifices offense to do it. So this is a 100-ton assault mech, but all it has is 4 ER mediums and 4 AC5s. So it doesn't throw out much damage. It's still pretty fast for an assault. It's still 4.6, but look at this fucking armor. Can you look at this thing, Scott? Hello?
Scott blew a fuse, so
okay. But anyway, this thing has max armor. I don't know if you can see this. It's got 42, 42, 34, 34, and then up here, it's got 30. And then the crazy thing, there's a version of this. There's 4 variants of this. This is the Clan Tech version. It has clan weapons. It's basically the same version as above, but they put clan ACs in it, so they take up less weight and less space. So they've upgraded these to 10s instead of 5s. This version here is maybe the most durable mech in the game, or one of the most durable mechs in the game. It's got this modular armor. So if you see these are armor boxes you have to tick before you tick the boxes here. So normally a mech, you take damage here, and then once it's gone, you start taking damage on the internals. This mech would take damage here, then take damage on the arm, then take damage internal. On top of that, it's got ferrolaminar armor. It says right there. Ferrolaminar is for every time you take damage, you subtract 1 from it for each block of 5. So if you got shot with this ER large laser, it does 10 damage. So you would apply it in 5-point blocks. So you would subtract 1, and then you would take 4. Then you would subtract 1 and take the other 4. So you're only going to take 8 damage instead of the 10. Where this really becomes just absolutely insane is SRMs. This doesn't have SRMs, but remember, SRMs do 2 damage per missiles. Because it applies it in 2-point groups, So if you got shot with an SRM-6 and they hit with all 6 missiles, normally you're taking 2, 2, 2, 2, 6 times, so you're going to take 12. If you have ferrolaminar, every time damage is applied, you subtract 1, so you're only going to take 1 from all that. So you're taking half damage. And then it gets even crazier when you get shot with shit like LBX autocannons, which apply damage in 1-point groups. It just ignores it. Like if this thing got hit with an LBX 20 and they rolled 17 on the cluster chart, where it would normally take 17 individual 1-point damages all over it, this thing just ignores it outright. So pretty fucking brutal. But this thing, if you look, super fucking slow. It's got a bunch of electronic warfare shit and modular armor. If you look, like it says damage E, that's because it doesn't have. This thing only has 4 guns on it. It's got 2 clan ER larges and 2 clan pulse. But the problem is 2 of them make 12, 2 of them make 10. So that's 44 heat that it's making. And it only cancels 24 of that. So you're only going to be able to basically fire half the fucking weapons on it. So it's got almost pure shit for offense, pure shit for speed, but goddamn is it a brick. So that's kind of just, people can kind of get the ideas of the extremes that certain designs push. Another example of something that just takes speed to the extreme. Michael, can you still hear me? Just checking that we're still recording. Everything's good.
I hear you just fine.
Okay. Where's that at? I need to minimize. Nope, I was there. Master list. There's this mech called a Fireball. I'll give you an example of one that just takes speed to the extreme. So we'll look at this one. So it's 3085, old is the new. 3085, old is the new. And Fireball. So look at this thing. It walks 11, runs 17, and then it has mask, which pushes it to 22. So you got to think back at that mech we just looked at move 3-5. So this thing moves 4.5 times as fast as it does. But look at its armor. Like, if this thing gets hit with a Gauss rifle almost anywhere, it's fucking dead. Like, even the center torso is only 9, and then 6 are bleeding over the internals, and it only has 6 internal. So literally a Gauss rifle hit anywhere on this mech kills it, or an ERPPC, or anything like that. And then if you look at its weapons, it literally just has 2 ER mediums and an ER small. So it doesn't shoot very far, doesn't throw out a lot of damage. And it only manages to cancel out 10 heat, which is still too, like, its weapons make 12 and then running it would make 14. So you'd have to like do the alpha, then only fire 2 weapons, alpha, then only fire 2, like basically on and off, like we talked about. This thing also has that XL engine, which pushes shit out in the torsos. So it's fragile there, on top of basically having no armor. So this thing is just an example of taking like that movement to the far extreme at the cost of everything else. This is an example. Where'd it go? Oh, no, sorry. It's in the same book. That Malice that I showed with the modular armor is an example of all defense with none of the other 2. I'm not gonna, well, here, I can do it real quick. This Loki. I'll show you one that's all offense and no, like, average speed and virtually no armor for its weight, which would be a Loki. The Loki, this may not look bad, but this is pure shit for a heavy mech. Like, this is only 11. This is like that primitive Cyclops that we looked at. It does move okay. This is just average for clan, but it's average for clan is still good. But if you look, it's got 2 machine guns, Streak SRM-6, a bunch of electronic warfare equipment, 3 ER mediums, a targeting computer, 4 APODs, which like APODs are little pods that go on the legs that when infantry get near, they're basically claymores. They blow up and murder a bunch of infantry around the feet, and 2 ER PPCs. So it's got tons of firepower for its weight because it's only 65 tons. This is like, if you remember those inner sphere assault mechs we looked at, like the Tenshi or the Cyclops, it only had half as many guns. So it says double the guns of an inner sphere assault mech, but it has shit armor. So that's all stuff basically to look for. And then, like I said, people really underestimate looking at these. This is really important. This where you look for where things take up critical slots, how much critical slots it takes up. If you have an XL engine, like once again, these clan ones only take up 2 out here, which is good because if you lose the torso, you don't just die. Where the inner sphere ones, you die. But does it have case or not? Is it pushing your engine out into these side torsos? Are you crit packed? Where a good example of being crit packed would be, let's say this torso was empty except for some like LRM 10 ammo. The reason that's bad is no matter what you roll, because all these will be roll again, basically you're always hitting the ammo. So that would mean every time it takes a crit in this area, you're basically just blowing up the ammo and you're going to lose that whole torso. So little things like that, you may look at a mech and think, oh, this is great. It's fast. You know, it has tons of armor. It's got decent firepower, and miss something like that. It may just have a really like shitty design flaw where all it has is ammo over here, where every time you take a crit, it gets hit in that ammo. Another thing, you may look at a mech and it may look fucking totally awesome, like a Hunchback 2C. I think that would be in here. Let me find that. That's a good, I do want to bring that up because that's something we haven't talked about, is ammo dependency and mechs that have an ammo problem. And this is the quintessential mech that has an ammo problem. Hunchback 2C. It's in 3058. Clan. Hunchback 2C. Okay. So people are going to love it. This is a funny mech. This is like really pushed to an extreme. So this is going to seem really good at first, and then I'll point out why. So for one, why won't you scroll? There it goes. Pretty slow for a clan mech, especially only a medium. Most clan mediums move at 6'9", so this is fairly slow for a clan medium. It also has fairly crappy armor for a clan medium. So this thing is pushing the extreme of what we just talked about, where it has everything is pushed into weapons. So this thing has 2 Ultra AC-20s. So if you look, this thing does 20 damage per shot. So that's 20, a brick of 20, a brick of 20. What's crazy is these Ultra models, you can choose to double tap with an Ultra autocannon. So this thing can do 40 damage in 2 blocks of 20. So 20, you'd roll to hit. If you hit, you'd roll a location, do 20. Then you would roll another location and do another 20. Same thing with this. So this thing can throw out 80 fucking damage in 20-point blocks, which is absolutely insane. But if you look, it's got 1 ton of ammo that does 5 shots for this gun, and 1 ton of ammo that does 5 shots for this gun. And if you double tap with it, you use 2 shots. So if we do the math on this and you double tapped, you can fire for 2 turns on full auto, and then a 3rd turn at without firing the 2nd volley. So basically, you get 2 ultra volleys and then a 3rd normal out of each gun, and then it's out of ammo, and then you're down to being a really slow clan mech with shit armor with 2 medium lasers for 1,700 points. What do you think of that, Michael?
That doesn't sound like the best way to go picking your mech. But
so, what's funny about this? This is in the fluff. So in the fluff, there's a couple things going on with clans. One, because they're Klingons, they're always challenging each other. And usually when they challenge each other, like say I were to challenge you, I pick the challenge. So I challenge you. If you accept, then you get to pick basically weapon choice. So if we're 2 mech warriors and I challenge you to a fight, you could decide whether the fight is going to be what they call augmented or unaugmented. So unaugmented is we just have a fucking fist fight or a fight with weapons like swords or whatever, but we're just dudes on foot. If we decided to fight augmented, we use our mechs, and then we're going to have a one-on-one mech fight. So some smart-ass clansmen came up with this design to be used as a dueling mech. It's basically a cheat version to always win a challenge. The idea is, because the way clan challenges work, you're basically stuffed into a small area where your weapons basically start in range. Like imagine 2 giant robots fighting on an area of like a football field where you're just standing at each other and running around in a small area and just shooting at each other until one of you drops dead. This mech is basically designed to do that. It only has enough ammo to basically just immediately, without mercy, just fuck up another mech regardless of size in a hurry, but then basically do nothing else. So it was designed as a dueling mech. The other thing that clans have going on in the fluff is, I'm not going to get into the full fluff, but basically they have a warrior hits his prime in clan terms. Like this isn't necessarily for real. It's just what they believe. They believe a warrior hits their prime between the age of 20 and 30. And once you get over 30 years old, you're almost considered worthless. So warriors that don't die honorably in combat, like that's what every clan person wants, is they want to have a really successful career, hit their peak around 30 years old, where they've become so successful and won so many awards that their genes, their genetic material is passed on to the breeding program, because clans don't breed through normal human means. Like everything is basically everybody's genetically engineered in a test tube, and the only way for your genetic material to be added into that program where your DNA gets passed on is to become a great warrior. So their ideal life is to make it to 30, become so good and so awesome and win so many accolades, your DNA gets stuck into the breeding program, and then at that point die in some like glorious last stand or last charge or some glorious way on the battlefield. For people that doesn't happen to, that they basically keep surviving through all these engagements, and then they wind up one day looking in the mirror and they're 45 years old and nobody thinks they're worth a fuck, they jump into something like this Hunchback 2C and go on a suicide run where they try to accumulate as much glory in a short period of time on a battlefield, while most likely dying in the process. It's kind of like a last chance mech. So
sounds fucking ass.
Yeah. So this like has a really cool fluff aspect to it. So that's what we were talking about earlier. When you design your army, you need to look at the fluff of what you're trying to do, and you start reading up on all these mechs. So like Scott, like if you would have just looked at this mech, you wouldn't really think anything of it. You'd think, oh, this thing's got a really fucking just like critical design flaw in it. I would never take this. But then you read the fluff and you're like, oh, well, I'm going to play with 10 mechs. I'm playing clans, and I'm going to run a binary, which is 2 stars. A star is 5 mechs, so a binary is 2 stars, 10 mechs. In my fluff, I'm going to have one guy that's an older dude that just wants to, go out in a blaze of glory. He's what they call, the clan term for that is Salamna. So he's you got the Salamna warrior. This is a mech that he would pick, and then we'll play it in the game. And yeah, it may not do the greatest thing, but it's fucking awesome fluff wise, and it can be awesome. Like, look, it's only 1,600 points, which is cheap for a clan mech. If somebody took that really expensive Tenshi or whatever I showed earlier, that was like 2,700 points, that Intersphere mech. something like that. I can't find it, but anyway, you guys get the point. And this thing ran up on it and just like totally fucking chewed it in half in one volley. It's obviously going to get its points back. Plus, it's cool fluff wise, so it is still useful. It's just all in how you play it. So, but I'm trying to think. We've went over ammo dependency, which, like I said, this is the quintessential when somebody talks about ammo dependency and having very short ammo supply. This is the best example of that. We talked about things that are all offense but shitty everything else, which once again, this is a perfect example. The Loki is another good example of that. The Loki doesn't have an ammo problem like this does. It just has it only moves average. It just has an armor problem. We talked about having all defense, but very little of anything else, which would be that Malice variant. And then we talked about being very well-rounded, which would be like a Mad Cat. There's a lot of examples of that. And then we talked about something that was dedicated fully to movement, but didn't have much hitting power armor, which is Fireball is a really good example of that. And you'll find gems out there like, so the cool thing is like all these mechs that we went over today, plus tons of others, certain designs are only available to certain factions. So like that Tenchi I showed you earlier with that targeting computer and the Gauss rifle and the 5 lights and the rocket launchers and all that, that Kuritan mech, it's only available to the Draconis Combine. So if that's a mech, and it looks awesome too, it's a really cool model. So if that's a mech you want to run, you're pretty much going to have to run Draconis Combine. So when you go to pick your army, the way I did it, I started with models. I looked the models like these are, I wrote down the names. I literally took a piece of paper. I went through Iron Wind Metal's website and I looked at every model and I wrote down the names of all the models I like, just looking at models. Then I did the same thing at War Hansa and the same thing at Stratos, and I had this big list of mechs. Like, these are mechs that look decent enough that I feel fine buying them, painting them, and putting them on the table. Then I broke them down into class, like lights, mediums, assaults, because I didn't want like a whole army of nothing but assault mechs or nothing but mediums, whatever. So I broke them down into, well, these mechs are assaults, these are heavies, whatever. And then out of those brackets, I kind of just like took half of them and discarded them. Like, of those brackets, I picked like the half of them that were in the top half of looks. And then once I had that list, like I like the way all these look and I have a good mix. Then I went through and I looked at what factions could take a majority of those mechs. And then when I found out a faction that could take a majority of those mechs, I then started looking at individual variants that faction could take of that mech and then just pick the best variant for what I was trying to do. So you can go that way off basically looking at models. If you don't really care what the models look like and you're more into the rules, you can do like what we showed you earlier where you pick a faction, pick a timeline, and then just start looking at record sheets and find the rules and then just buy whatever models match that. Or you can do it fluff wise where you start reading the novels, reading the not the record sheets, the technical readout books that have the fluff. I'll show you guys. We didn't even show you that in the other video. I'll show you what a technical readout book looks like. So we'll go to the 3050. So we talked about the Mad Cat a lot. I don't know if this is clickable or not. I hope it is. Nope. It is on page 136 though. So this is the Mad Cat. So these technical readout books, it sort of shows you the rules. Like it tells you, it has the list of weapons and it shows where the weapons are located, but it doesn't show you how much heat or damage the weapons cause, but it does show you how many slots they take up and their weight. So this does tell you the weight of the weapons where the other sheet doesn't tell you that. It tells you the armor, but it doesn't have the dots as a good visual reference. It literally just has a number of dots, and it shows its movement. That's it. So you can't really play a game with this. It's not a record sheet, but it does kind of show you the stats. But it shows you all the stats, kind of the basic stats here. and then the overview of what it was built for, its capabilities, where it's been deployed, like where it's deployed at, who started with it, whatever. And then it has this little section on notable mech warriors that have piloted the mech. So it's kind of a little bit of fluff for you, which is pretty cool. Then the next page, like this is an Omni mech, like we talked about, where it has the pods where it can change out stuff. This shows all the configurations of where shit goes. So you don't need these. These are just good fluff references. But if you wanted to like read through here and read about the fluff, you can also pick your mechs this way and make them fit. So you could basically go about it through model looks, model fluff, or just look at the rules of a mech and build a list that way. So there's lots of different starting points, but you're always going to need this page. And then we didn't really go over Sarna. I'll show you why I like Sarna real quick. Where did that go? Oh, it's right up here. So, for example, remember we went through all those record sheets at the beginning on the Cyclops? Well, if I wanted, without having to open up every one of those record sheets and just like go through them one at a time. I think I spelled Cyclops wrong. In fact, I know I did. Maybe it'll correct me. It's got an E in it. Yes, I did mean Cyclops. Sorry. I went Al Gore on everyone. Put an E on potato. So shows your Cyclops here. It also has the description and some fluff, which is cool. Tells its tonnage. It has the speed and weapons breakdown. But down here, it has all the variants. So this will be your baseline. You can see it has 12 heat sinks, so it's going to cancel 12 heat. It doesn't actually show its movement in game. It just shows its max speed. Well, basically, you just always take this and divide it by 11. So if you divide this by 11, you end up with 6. So that means its max speed is 6. So it moves 4-6. So it's pretty easy. So if this begins with a 6, it's going to move 4-6. If this begins with an 8, it's going to move 5-8. This begins with a 11, it's going to move 7-11, so on and so forth. So once you know that, you don't, even though this is the fluff speed that it moves at, you can figure out what its game speed is. Fucking really easy. But anyway, if you read through these little things, it will tell you what equipment it has. So, for example, when we looked at these Cyclopses, if I was just looking for a mech, like a command mech that had that C3 master in it, I can look through here and start reading these, and I can see right here that this one has a C3 computer, and I know none of these other ones do. This one has a pair of master computers. So I know that this variant has 2 C3 masters, and this one has a single C3 master. So I can just discard all these other versions without having to look at them and just look at these 2. So it saves me a lot of time, if that makes sense. So that's basically what I use Sarna for. I can look at these text blocks, and once you get used to reading them, you can basically decipher the information out of these. It's not quite as good as obviously staring at the record sheet, but you can do it at a much rapid pace than looking through all the record sheets and get it narrowed down to a few, and then go look at just a few where you don't have to look at every single one.
Sounds
basically
like
time saver. So I think that's it. Do you have any more questions, Michael? Did we cover everything better than we did in the last show? Did you actually learn stuff this time?
Yeah, learned quite a bit this time. This actually made a lot of sense for somebody who has understanding and has access to all the books and everything like that. Definitely kind of shed some on just kind of just like pick what you want kind of thing. This is not really a generic army or generic like build that people have to go to. You need this type of mech, you need this type of mech. It's just really pick what you want, and then just seeing how to understand what the actual mech sheet looks like and understanding. A big point that I was kind of confused about was like how the armor works and all those little dots and like that.
Yeah.
And seeing a mech sheet and explain like that really did clear up quite a bit.
Yeah, and there's a little bit to, like, if you just there's a small, I think in the rules, like that whole section, how damage transfers and how criticals work, is basically just one page in the rule book. But yeah, my favorite way is I like to build it off fluff. So like like we showed earlier in the thing, like I pick my faction, like if I want to do a Draconis Combine, they're available in all eras, and then I would basically just pick the era. Like if I was reading the books, I really like the Ghost Regiments, which are based on real life the Yakuza, the Japanese gangs. They didn't actually start being a thing until this late Succession War, like this Renaissance era. So I would know that I don't want to play any of these eras if I want to do Ghost Regiments. Kind of their heyday is the Clan Invasion. So like if I was really into that, I would probably pick a Clan Invasion army to do my Ghost Regiments, just based on the fluff that I know. So I would start here, and then I would click on these battle mechs, and then start selecting my mechs. And then when I was selecting these mechs, I would go to Sarna, that page, the other page we had open, and I would read the fluff, because in the Draconis Combine, they're kind of like the clans where they believe in the personal honor and stuff. There are certain mechs that are considered dishonorable to pilot for whatever reason, like maybe they had a design flaw from the factory or have a bad reputation. And then there are some mechs that are the opposite of that, that are rare and considered very prized. Being Yakuza, if you know anything about how the Draconis Combine works, they're kind of like second-class citizens. They're kind of frowned on by certain people. So they probably wouldn't have any of those like certain mechs that are like have a lot of honor tied to them or are very prestigious. They probably wouldn't have access to that. You would probably look for ones that don't mention that at all, or the ones that are mentioned that they're kind of like a dishonorable mech to pilot or whatever. Or you could write your fluff where your Yakuza guy pulled some strings and did like the mafia thing where they like, oh, this shipment of mechs went missing, and maybe they do have a few of those, highly prized honorable mechs that they've gotten their claws into, but you probably wouldn't do like a whole lance of that. But that just depends on your fluff background and how you want to do it. So that's kind of some of the fun things you can do to build an army. But I think that's pretty much all I have to say about shit, man.
I definitely appreciate you going over that. That does make a lot more sense now. I don't have any more questions or...
Okay. Well, I think that about covers it on Battletech shit for now. I mean, we'll still obviously keep people appraised on their hobby progress and stuff. And then if people have any more, like just super, more in-depth questions on how you do stuff or want any personal help, just like we always say, just email us or PM us or whatever, and I can help you with that. Scott can too. Scott's balls deep in the Battletech, so you can hit me up or Scott up or whatever, and hopefully Michael will catch the Battletech bug at some point too. We can have the 3-headed dragon again.
Have people watch these videos.
Yeah. But I think that's it. That's all I have to say. Do you have anything else to say?
That's it.
All right. We'll have regular scheduled programming next time. Later.